Hello and welcome. I usually focus on the things we can do to help ourselves in this life and avoid talking about the difficulties themselves. There's so many people talking about the different challenges people face and raising awareness, and there's a lot out there. I don't know how much I can say that's not just contributing to the noise on some level. And so I focus on the perspectives and the skills and the tools that help us navigate the difficulties without exploring the difficulties themselves. However, one keeps coming up for me that I don't hear talked about a lot, and I think it's really relevant to what we see and how we perceive ourselves and others in certain situations. And I don't know much about it academically, but the basic concept is known as reactive abuse. And what'll happen is a person with less than loving intent will poke, provoke, deprive, torment, do whatever they need to do to get a person to finally kind of break and react. And when we do, we don't always look our best selves. Yeah. So often if you walk in and you just see a person yelling at another person, you might think they're attacking this individual. What you may not realize is that the individual they're yelling at has been tormenting them for hours, days, weeks at a time. And this other individual who's now overflowing with that looks like the crazy person because they're yelling. They look like the aggressor because they're waving their hands and having a bad time of it. But it's not because they are trying to make trouble. It's that they finally have reached a limit. And, pardon, there doesn't seem to be a lot of understanding or compassion around this one. And so I just wanted to call it out and talk for a minute or more about how it's important for us to be compassionate with ourselves and each other when either we know that we have been tested beyond a limit or tormented beyond a limit, or we see people and we don't know the whole story when they're having a departure from civil behavior, let's call it. I do think that we need to conduct ourselves civilly and with restraint and sobriety. I'm not saying it's okay to go around bugging out on people. Doesn't work. That's not how we should be aiming to operate. But we don't really aim for that broken place from which we sometimes react poorly. And I'll speak for myself because I've been the one to look a fool in these situations where what's going on, nobody sees it. They don't know, because that's also part of it, is often a person who will do this to another person is aware of what they're doing, and they'll do it discreetly where other people can't see it, where it doesn't leave any marks, so to speak. And it could be sleep deprivation. It could be saying the same thing over and over that a person's asked you to stop saying because it's upsetting or disrespectful or inappropriate, right? It could be doing strange things like just being withdrawn in a way that's not just withdrawn, but actually kind of hostile. It could be spending all the money if you're interdependent and leaving you in a position where you don't have resources. It could be refusing to honor agreements. It could be accusing a person of things that aren't true. It could be a lot of stuff that somebody does to wear another person down that nobody else sees it because it's done quietly over here. And in the case of reactive abuse, what'll happen is a reasonably well-adjusted, well-intended person will try to work with it. And then they'll realize that it's not getting anywhere. You just keep looping back to the same problem in the same situations, or sometimes variations on a theme. But the erosion of spirit and will are persistent over some different period of time, depending on who you are and what's at play. Because we all have different breaking points, but I think having reached a breaking point is a fairly universal experience for most people. Most people who are pretty well adjusted, who've had some difficulty with difficult personalities especially, may have reached a breaking point, or maybe we're just trying to do the impossible, and we get out beyond where we can convince ourselves it's worth going anymore, and we just, out of frustration, give up and blow up. Whatever provokes us to that place, it's a very human experience to go beyond the limits of what your system can handle. This is what trauma is. Trauma is when you go out beyond the limits and something actually breaks off. And I think that this is at least well on the way to that, where the psychic torture basically results in a person who has good intentions acting poorly, and a person who has bad intentions being able to look at them and go, see how they are? And so for ourselves, if we're in that situation, I think it's important to recognize that what we need to do is take really good care of ourselves and limit the ways in which a person can provoke us to react. And I used to have a mantra, which is about people saying, don't let them get your goat. I don't even know the origins of that, but for some reason I decided I would tell myself, that's my goat, they can get their own. And something so dumb and simple and a little silly would actually help me kind of step back and be like, okay, yep, yep, okay. Like, I don't have a dog in this fight. Keep going. And as long as I was rested and not in actual physical pain with like real imminent demands, I could usually use that tool to say like, But there's a point at which day after day, week after week, a person's going to find your weak spot. It's going to wear it thin, and it's going to open just a little. And a person who's going to treat you this way is going to find that break in the defense and enter there and do what harm they can there. And often make sure that that last charge goes off in a conspicuous way where other people will see it. And so, without getting into deeper conversations about the personality types and who would do this and what causes this behavior, just know that this is a thing. And unfortunately, it's not very well known or acknowledged in the legal system. At least here in the States, it's not generally recognized. And I don't know if there's anywhere else that people do take that into account. So it is risky if we lose our cool at the wrong moment and a person of bad intent decides to say, oh, okay, look, I'm calling the cops. Like, now you've got real problems, and it's going to be real hard to explain it to whoever shows up and just wants to file a report and be done with it. And there's not a lot of understanding in the courts either. Should it become, say, a family court matter or something like that, you're not going to get a lot of understanding there. So it's super important to learn how to develop skills for the moment, for getting away from these relationships, for building good boundaries and good responses, for healing whatever we can, whatever it was that was eroded, make that whole, and take back the power, because it's actually a huge liability to allow people to whittle us down to that bloody nub of raw nerve where it takes just that last little thing and they can set us off. They have our puppet strings, and that's not okay. We have to be responsible for that. And so, as usual, I'm talking about what we need to do to get forward and do better, feel better, live better. But I do want to shine a little light on this issue and say that if you find that this is a dynamic in your life, look into it and consider what it would take for you to be in a different paradigm altogether without the kind of people who would treat you that way. I don't think there's any working it out or finding a resolution if this has been a pattern. I think you're better off cutting your losses. And I'm sorry, I know we always want to hold out hope when it's friends, family, partner, but whatever the case is, it's so much better to just cut your losses now and find a way out. And if you find that you have a habit of drawing these scenarios into your life, different people, different times, that's a good clue to look at what was some of the patterning in our early lives, I like to go back and say, okay, what taught me that this was the way to do things? And what about that works? You can keep what works. You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but also to evaluate what is no longer useful and what is even detrimental at this point, so that we can weed out those messages and replace them with useful messages. This is why developing good self-talk is so central to being well and being able to navigate things, because I sit here watching Jefferson Fisher. He gives great advice about how to handle communication in charged situations, often with difficult people. And you can learn all day, but if you don't have the presence of mind, it's not going to work. And if you have dealt with these situations, you're probably a little rough around the edges. You're probably a little twitchy and susceptible. And healing that is the first thing. It's got to be the first thing, whether you're in the situation or you draw these situations to you through subconscious choices we make, whatever that might be. And to know that it's not that you're a bad person. I know that when I've lost my cool, I feel like the worst human being in the world. I don't even feel like a human being. I'm like, I'm a monster. This is horrible. I feel a lot of shame around it. And it's actually hard for me to talk about this because it's so painful to think of the times that I lost my cool because somebody wore me down and got me out on that limb. And I'm the one who finally succumbed. Now, the other part of that is to give ourselves some clemency when reviewing the facts, because if you take a perfectly well-adjusted person, you take a soldier, a warrior, and they're captured and tortured, they're going to be sweating and howling and screaming and flailing around from the torture. That doesn't change who they are. That's not about their character. It's not even about their general strength. It's just that we all have breaking points. So we got to understand that we are kind of doing our best, but when that's not enough, it's time to look at what's going on and figure out how we can do better, because doing infotainment about reactive abuse, I'm sure somebody else can do a better job of it. That's not really my wheelhouse or my style. But to talk about what it's like to experience that and the damage to your reputation and your other relationships and your standing at large, it's so damaging. It's not just that you lose your cool. If somebody's willing to take advantage of this, they will use this to convince others that you are the problem. They're just here and look at you. You're crazy. You're yelling at them. What's the matter with you? I'm fine. I'm calm. Because they're also very good at being calm, people who do this, generally, in the way that we can work with psych profiles, right? If this is in the psych profile, odds are bad intent and a willingness to distort the perceptions of others, and even an intention to do it so that they can distort others' perception. They tend to go together as a suite. So in terms of addressing things that are problematic, this is one I really have not been able to find a lot about, and I'm going to go take another look, because I've said that before and then I've gone and done another pass with different search terms and good information comes up. But this is one that keeps surfacing for me as a topic lately. Happily not because I'm in these situations at the moment, but I have been, and there's been a number of reasons why I've been thinking about it again lately, and it can have long-term impacts. That's what I'm saying. It's reputational damage can be almost permanent. It's not always easy when somebody's put you in that position to come back and show who you are. Like, this is me. This is who I am. But you saw me this way, and now that's in your head forever. It's why we have defamation laws. You're not allowed to slander and libel people because we understand the damage. But this is actually an assault on your reputational standing. And it's very costly. And we have to be the gatekeepers when we're around people who would do this. And we need to be our own protectors and remove ourselves from people who would do this. And I think it would help us to be more aware and compassionate with ourselves and each other, because it's really like a nightmare funhouse to go through these experiences. And it's good to remember other people, maybe their breaking point's not the same as yours, but it's their breaking point and they're having that experience, and being willing to consider all of the facts. This is another thing. We're so quick to pick our team and shout like whatever party line, but it's so much better for us collectively and individually to stop and evaluate, slow down and consider what's going on. Wait until you know what's happening to pass judgment, because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, even if it's not behind closed doors in that sense. There are things that we cannot see or know. And so having compassion for others is another piece of this. So, all right, that's my once around on reactive abuse. And I hope that you are not experiencing this, or if you have, you are well along in your healing, because it is super damaging to us as people and to our lives in general. It has many long-term impacts if it's executed with enough force. So I hope that something here shines a light and offers some value, some insight, something that's gonna click for you that says, oh, I think that's maybe what I saw when my really calm, chill friend started freaking out and I didn't know why she was yelling at that person, or I didn't know what was wrong with me, that this one person seems to provoke me to a level that's not normal, and I feel really out of control around that, or I have shame about having lost control, or I'm working to rebuild relationships because of it. Doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a human who was pushed beyond their limits. And no, the way we behave isn't okay, and it's not a free pass to carry on, but it's an insight into how we get there and what we can do to begin finding our way back out, back into the light and away from the funhouse mirrors of whatever dark plan that is. So, all right, well, as always, I thank you for coming along. Appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next round. Take care.